Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Anne, and I'm here today to talk about the books that I read in January. I know it has been a long time since I've been here. January was an odd month. We had some sickness going around my family. Everyone's fine, but it just, yeah, it didn't make for a great reading month. I didn't get super sick. I got a little sick, but I was mostly just exhausted all the time. So when I wasn't working, I was sleeping, which really cuts into your reading time. And the books I was reading, my mental capacity wasn't great. So I didn't read a ton, which is why I haven't really been around much. February is looking up, so I have high hopes for the rest of the year. But I only read 6 books in January, which I know is still perfectly respectable. But yeah, most of them were pretty short. And I actually DNF'd 2 books too. So let's talk about those. I'll stop blabbing and we'll talk about books. So I'm going to just mention briefly the 2 books I DNF'd. The first book I DNF'd was Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. I was reading this for the Buzzwordathon at the first week of January. That was for books that had the word dream or variation thereof in the title. So I picked up Strange the Dreamer, which has long been on my TBR. It was one of the books in my 20 books to read last year that I didn't get to. And I got a solid 120 pages in, and I just couldn't do it. I was so bored, and I didn't care about the characters, and I know her writing is very flowery, and I was trying to take my time and take notes, and I just didn't care. And I was so tired of it, so I put it down one evening thinking I'd read something else and then come back to it, and the next day I had even less desire to pick it up again. So I'm not going to have patience this year, I don't think, with books that are just I'm not enjoying or are just kind of middle of the road. Like, there's too many books I want to read. So I'm going to be brutal with the DNFing this year. So this was DNF number 1 for the year. Later in the month, I also DNF'd The Conspiracy of Us by Maggie Hall. This is a YA book following our main girl, whose name I now can't remember, Avery, who discovers she may not be who she thinks she is. This follows kind of the concept that there's 12 families in power in the world, 12 kind of key families, and they pretty much rule the world. And she turns out to be one of them, even though she's been raised by her mother. This has been kind of kept separate from her. She discovers she may be part of this family, or these set of families, which sounds like a great premise, and it's not a bad book. I read 160 pages. I was over halfway, and I was going to push through, but I realized I didn't want to spend 3 more hours with this book. I didn't like it. I didn't like the characters. This, I think, will be a great read for some people. It just has all that kind of YA drama and some really interesting ideas, and, the whole idea of, you go in for a private shopping session at Prada and then someone tries to kill you is cool. It's not for me. So, just not for me. I'm sure some people would love this though. Alright, so let's talk about the books I actually did read. I read 2 books. I succeeded in completing, I should say, 2 books for the Buzzwordathon. Again, the keyword was dream. So I read The Dream Daughter by Diane Chamberlain. This follows a woman named Carly in the 1970s, I think in 1970, who is pregnant. She discovers that her child has a heart defect. So through a series of events, someone comes along who tells her that they can send her into the future where she will be able to have fetal surgery, where that's possible, and they can fix the baby's heart. And drama ensues, as I'm sure you can imagine. Obviously, I won't tell you what happens, but I enjoyed this. It was a solid 4-star book for me. I enjoyed Carly's story and just the whole idea of how far you go, what you do for your children. And yeah, just kind of the multiple timelines happening, and just the drama it created both in 1970 and in the future where Carly shows up. It was a solid read. I really enjoyed it and would recommend. The other book I completed for the Buzzwordathon was The Cure for Dreaming by Kat Winters. This one was not quite as successful. That's not fair. I'll say this. I was very entertained while I was reading this book. I don't think it's a particularly great book. Well, I don't know if that's true either. Yeah, I don't think it's a particularly great book. It actually has pretty good reviews, um, but I had some pretty big problems with it. However, I did find it entertaining to read, so I guess if that's all you're basing your review off of, it was entertaining. I wanted to know what was going to happen. This is set in 1900. We follow a girl, Olivia, who is 16, 17, and lives with her father, and it's dealing with the whole kind of the suffragette movement and the control of the men over the women, that idea. And then this hypnotist comes along, and the idea is that he can cure the girls from having these ideas that are too big for them, basically. Okay, so things I liked about this book. It is set in Portland. If you don't know, I live in Oregon, so I enjoy books that are set in my area, because, yeah, it's just fun. It's like you find little Easter eggs that other people wouldn't necessarily see. So I don't live in Portland, but this book is set in Portland. I've been in Portland, and so that was fun. I enjoyed the setting of it and having that kind of 1900 Portland vibe to it. And yeah, I liked the format. They include some old photographs. Hang on. Just quotes and photographs throughout the book, and that was enjoyable. That added kind of a fun element to it. The things I didn't like about it. This kind of has the overriding all men are evil idea, and that I really hate that in a book, because all men are not evil. Some men are jerks, some women are jerks. But it just, like, all men are evil, and all men are trying to, control the women and belittle them, and there's not a single good guy out there, except, of course, the one you happen to fall in love with. I don't like that in books when, big bad men, they're all bad. Anyway. The dialogue felt way too modern for a 1900 story. Just even some slang they were using and different things, it just didn't fit the setting of the book. And just, the characters felt very flat to me. It was predictable. I had some bigger issues with some of the plot elements that I don't want to go into because it'll be spoilery. But basically, I had some major issues with some things that happened. Like, what? That doesn't make sense. But, yeah, it is what it is. I would categorize this as YA. I'm not positive if that's what it's categorized as or not. But I would definitely categorize it as YA. We follow a teenage girl, and it reads very YA. Again, I was entertained while I was reading it, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. The kind of fun thing about that book was it did lead me on a little bit of a rabbit trail off my TBR this month, because she references the book 10 Days in a Madhouse by Nellie Bly, which is a book I had wanted to read. It's a nonfiction, and so I went ahead and picked that up and read that. So this is 10 Days in a Madhouse by Nellie Bly. This is nonfiction. I said all those things. I just repeated myself. If you don't know, Nellie Bly was a journalist turn century, or late 1800s, I guess. And she actually got herself committed to the Blackwell Island, which was a women's asylum. So she actually acted crazy and got herself committed to this asylum so that she could write about it. And she was determined to go in and write everything, the good and the bad and everything. And so this is just like 100 pages of basically her journal of that time, 10 days she spent there, the good and the bad. And it's mostly bad. Just the horrific conditions and what was expected of the people and how they were treated, even when there was literally nothing wrong with them. There's some bright spot, there's some fun characters, some sweet people that come into her life, but in general, it's just talking about kind of the horrors of those 10 days of being at Blackwell Asylum. I would recommend it, though. It's really interesting. This particular edition had a couple other short essays in it about her being a servant for a few days, I think. And then, yeah, something else I can't remember. But yeah, it was quick read. It was really interesting, and it was kind of a fun spin on the fiction I had just read about suffragettes and, yeah, just that time period. It also led me to pick up the short story The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. I'm pretty sure I read this in high school, but it was a long time ago. This is literally 15 pages, and it is a story of a woman who was having some health issues, mental health issues, emotional health, and so the cure was that she was locked in her room and basically wasn't allowed to do anything, like nothing creative, no outlet at all. And so she starts seeing these figures in the wallpaper and basically goes insane, is driven insane by the cure for her issues. So just a couple really interesting things. This is a great book, by the way. You should read it. Short story. You should read it. But just a couple interesting things that kind of take place in that same time period as The Cure for Dreaming and address some of the same issues. I have two other books to talk about. One is Behind Closed Doors by B.A. Paris. This is a thriller, and this was what I read for Chantel at An Intentional Life. It does a Read Your Bookshelf challenge. So each month there's a different prompt, and you're supposed to read something off your shelf. The prompt for January was a home word in the title. So this has the word doors in it. That's a home-ish type word. So this is a thriller. We follow a woman and her husband and her sister, I guess. But you have Jack and Grace, who's this perfect couple. Basically, they come across, everything's like meals are always perfectly prepared, and Grace is always just dressed perfectly, and they seem so in love, and everything's so perfect. But little things start to come out about, Grace is never seen outside without Jack, and, just certain other things that start to raise suspicions. And so you get kind of a dual timeline, not totally, but like a year and a half apart of when Jack and Grace first met and what's happening now, and the stories kind of slowly start to meet in the middle. And yeah, it was a really interesting thriller. I think I gave it like a 3.5. Again, it kept me entertained, kept me reading. I wanted to know what happened next. It's not something I'll probably ever reread because it's a thriller, and now that I know the, big finish, I don't think it would have the same draw the second time, but for a one-time read through, it was enjoyable. The last book I read in January was The Book of Three by Lloyd Alexander. This is the first in the series, The Chronicles of Prydain. This was a reread. I think I read it in high school the first time, or maybe in college, I can't remember. And I didn't love it the first time around, but I kind of wanted to give it another try now that I'm older and I've read more fantasy. I decided to give it another try. In this book, we follow Taryn, who is a pig keeper or assistant pig keeper, to a kind of a special pig. And the pig escapes and he has to go after it, and this leads to a whole series of adventures and an evil horned king who is pictured there on the cover. And yeah, just all kinds of adventures. It's very classic fantasy. So, very Tolkien influenced, just very kind of old school classic fantasy. It has a lot of Welsh influence in it. All in all, the story was fine, but a little dry, a little dull. The writing was a little clunky. And yeah, I just wasn't that interested in it. It was okay, but I'm not interested enough to continue on with the series. So we're just going to leave it for now. I mean, who knows? Maybe someday I'll come back to it. For now, we're just not going to worry about the rest of the series. But that was it. The sixth book that I read in January. So that is it. 6 books. That's not a horrible number, but keep in mind, one was a 15-page short story and 2 were under 200 pages. So, not the greatest reading month ever, and nothing, like no 5 stars, nothing that absolutely blew me out of the water. So not the best reading start to the year, but that's okay, because we can only go up from here. That's probably not true. I shouldn't say that. But we are going to go up from here and do better the rest of the year and read books we enjoy more and be quick to DNF things. I'm already reading a couple books in February that I kind of want to DNF, but I'm close enough to the end. I think I'm just going to push through. But yeah, so like I said, these are the 6 books I read. Thank you for watching, and I will see you next time.